That's another year on the books. New videos, new subscribers, and even content featured on the History Channel, all in the last 365 days. I would, of course, like to take a moment to thank everybody watching. Without you, this channel would just be me talking into a microphone. And now I'm going to be honest. When it came to what to do for the 3-year anniversary of this channel, I actually wasn't really sure what direction I wanted to go in. I was struggling to come up with an idea when I realized, despite spending over 1,000 days now making videos discussing different paranormal occurrences and entities, I'd never really talked about my own personal experience with the unexplained. This story happened many, many years ago. I couldn't give you an exact age, but somewhere between 4 and 7 years old is probably my closest approximation. I was sleeping over at my maternal grandparents' house for the night, and at this point, I was the only person in the house who was still awake. I remember just sitting up in bed, in what was once my aunt's room, when I started to hear a voice. I remember it definitely being male, and it wasn't the voice of anyone I've ever met. Weirdly enough, it didn't exactly talk to me or even acknowledge that I was there. It just started telling a story. Now, this was a long, long time ago, and I was very young, so the details aren't exactly fresh in my mind, but I remember the story being very dark, not the kind of story you would really tell to a kid that age. From what I can recall, it was the story of some type of monster who was eating his way through the residents of a village, with the voice narrating in more detail than any type of story that I would have been exposed to at that point. I remember the voice actually being a pretty good narrator in all honesty, creating a frightening atmosphere and building tension very well, although I was too young and definitely too frightened to have been able to fully appreciate that. The story progressed until the monster got to the last house in the village, where a family had barricaded themselves inside. The narrator made it very clear what was going to happen next, and knowing that their fate was inevitable, I decided I didn't want to stick around to hear it, so I bolted out of the room. When I got into the hallway, I confirmed my suspicions that everyone else in the house was asleep. Weirdly enough, I just went back in my room. I don't quite recall my thought process there, but I was very young, and although I was scared, I just didn't really make too much of it. My limited experiences with the world meant that, honestly, I just figured voices appearing out of nowhere and reading you some pretty horrifying bedtime stories was just something that happens. The voice didn't come back that night, nor did it ever come back since, and I don't believe I got too much sleep that evening. I don't remember exactly how soon after the incident was, but I do remember telling my parents what happened. My mom told me that she had a similarly unexplainable experience while living in the house. That's another story for another video for another day. Even after all these years, I still don't really know what to make of what happened. No mundane explanation really fits. It wasn't a nightmare or some form of sleep paralysis, as I do remember moving around the room looking for the source of the voice as I was listening to the story. No one else in the house at the time would have even been awake, and even if they were, nobody could imitate that voice, so I don't believe that it was someone pulling a prank on me. I haven't really had any similar experiences since, so auditory hallucinations seem very unlikely, and I've never consumed any illicit substances in my life, much less at that age. So, if I'm going to be honest, for all my research into the mysteries of the world, I've never gotten a satisfying answer to my own. Final twist to the story that's really spooked me for years. Growing up, my mom heard more than a few Grimm's fairy tales from her parents. For anyone unfamiliar, Grimm's fairy tales are a collection of stories designed to teach children different lessons about safety, often by scaring them as badly as possible. If you grew up watching Disney, look into the fairy tales that inspired them, and you'll find out just how much the mouse had removed to avoid an R rating. Why do I mention this? Well, given the extremely dark nature of the story, and that it was told to me as a very young child, perhaps when my grandparents were telling those stories, someone or something had been listening in. And when I came over, it finally found its audience.